Forest fires can be pretty crazy, and this is one that I never want to go through again. I've never been in anything quite like this. I've seen a lot of things burn, but this one really hit home because it was so close and to our house. So I thought I'd put these pictures together and maybe refresh some of my thoughts on this and share it with a few of you guys. So here it is. Across 44. Thought I was going to roll right through and down the fence line, and essentially that's what it did. It jumped across. Started as something pretty small from a lightning strike a long time ago, and then kicked up with the winds. Jumped over on my neighbor Billy's property. We went over to help him, see if there's anything we could do to move some animals around and so on. And the fire got in the bad stuff there and decided to take off. So it actually jumped and caught some stuff way in the back, heading for Royal Trails first off, and then proceeded to kind of flare up and continue down. Now the winds are blowing probably 20 miles an hour, and then it started to flare up more right there towards 44 on the side of his property, and it continued to get worse. Not much we could do. He drug some hoses around, put some sprinklers out. The copter's flying around trying to spot this and keep all the ground crews going where they need to go, because there was so many fires all at the same time. So at this time, the officers had instructed us that we were under an evacuation order. My wife, my son, and my daughter are in the minivan there, parked in our driveway. My daughter's taking pictures as I'm across the road, helping the neighbor with what we can to see if we can protect his property, or at least move stuff around a little bit. I'm getting frantic calls from my son, who's 8 years old, saying, "Daddy, please, Daddy, the fire's here. Come on, let's go, let's go." He's terrified. I'm not there. My wife, Cheryl, is with them, and I keep getting repeated phone calls pleading. And of course, they're concerned. They see this huge fire. I'm over near the fire, and they're not sure which way this fire is going to come. So we did the best we could. Grabbed the camera, went over there, took some shots while we could on the way out as the fire continued to get more and more intense. You could feel the wind sucking you towards the fire and the immense heat coming off of it as the woods just exploded and the flames grew higher and higher and higher. It sounded a lot like, they say, like a train or something. It just roared so loud that it didn't sound like fire. It sounded like a strong wind, or almost like a train, I guess, going by. So these flames shot up, went well up over top of the trees, and just continued to roll down through. Now we could see the concern as the winds were blowing directly towards Royal Trails or down Royal Trails Road, and we knew how dry it was back in there and all the homes that were in the line of sight. At this time, I'm walking out and going back to the car with my kids to assure them that we're going to be okay. Again, when we were instructed by the officers that we had to either stay in our house and fight this fire directly from our structure, or we had to leave and go down the road. On one hand, it's really hard to leave something when you're not sure it's going to be there when you come back. On the other side, we know that that's just things, and that we need to get out and make sure that we're safe. So the officer said, "You've got to go. You've got to go down past the blockades." Our kids are upset as can be. They are worrying that the house is going to burn down, or we're going to get caught in the fire ourselves. We moved down the road a little ways, but I needed to see what was going on. It was our house, and we were well away from the fire, maybe 500 feet or so. But we really needed to know what was going on there. So we decided to move down, and if they were going to push us farther, they would push us farther, but we needed to stay, at least for the time being, out of harm's way, but to see what was going on. We had a fire behind our other location just 10 days ago, and got a chance to talk to the officers, or the firemen, and they said white smoke means that it's a fire with water on it. Black smoke is typically a structure. When you see the really dark black smoke, that's when there's a structure burning. So we're seeing white smoke. We're thinking the firefighters are back there and they're putting out some stuff, or at least spraying some water on the burning vegetation. At this point, the kids are saying, our house is going to burn down, our house is going to burn down. All we could do is stay calm and say, no, it's metal, it's a metal roof, it's concrete siding. We've got all of our brush cleared around it. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. Cheryl's sitting with her body out of the van, sitting on the window, looking out over top of the minivan, watching as this occurs. We were pretty sure that it was just brush until we started seeing black coming out of the location right over top of our warehouse and our home. At that point, we were saying, well, maybe it's something else. It's a puff of black smoke. But it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. And there came a point in time where all I could do is look over at my wife with her body outside of the van with tears running down, trying not to show the kids that she's crying or upset, trying to stay calm. And at this point, from what we're seeing, we're pretty sure that our structures, our house had burned. The amount of black smoke right there at the peak of the hill, right where our house is standing, right there at the edge of the driveway, kind of showed us. And this black smoke barreled for quite some time. All we could do is sit there and watch and say, it's just things. It was pretty crazy. And then when we thought it was as bad as it could be, it got worse. One of my guys, Casey, standing there, he looks over his shoulder to look at me and say, I think I just saw your house burn up. He didn't say anything, but then we saw this. These flames were higher than the trees, and they were intense. The firefighters or the trucks had backed up because of the intensity that we saw there, and the flames continued. The black smoke continued to barrel, and then the smoke started to change color a little bit, thinking maybe there's some water on it, unsure what it actually was. Thinking the worst was over, we continued to watch in awe and really not knowing what to do other than just to stand there and witness what was going on. And then almost like a flamethrower, the flames exited our driveway, and this is what we saw. The flames jumped the road and headed again to our neighbor's house. And at this time, the helicopter had come over and started dropping water to put stuff out. They made multiple trips. It was surreal. The flames had passed, the smoke started to clear, and we decided, after we saw some cars drive through and after the fire trucks had passed through, that we had to go take a look. We did get a chance to talk to the officers who were driving by. They had stopped and talked to us for a moment. I went and walked up and talked to them away from my family to ask what they knew and what was left of the house, and he had stated that as far as he knew, there was no reports of structure fires. So there was some hope there. That's for sure. Shortly thereafter, I had a chance to talk to one of the firefighters who also confirmed that they did not know of any structure fires. So that was definitely a sigh of relief. So while we drove back and looked around, we had to have some peace of mind to know what had burnt and what had not. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law had come down to pick up the kids and take them back. They had seen enough. They were headed back to Melbourne for the night just to get away from the turmoil. Our power was out. Our fish had no oxygen. I called my farm manager to come in. He was stopped at Royal Trails. They wouldn't let him through no matter what we could say. Finally, we were able to get a hold of one of the chiefs on the firefighter side, who said if they had to go get him, they would, to bring him in to help. Manley had come in, helped us. We checked the fish. We weren't sure if we were going to have to put them back out in the pond. We had a backup generator. We didn't dare turn it on because the smoke was so heavy. We were afraid we were going to poison the fish from the smoke and have deaths. So our only other option was to possibly put these fish back out in ponds or bag them up with pure oxygen to see what we could do to save those. So it was a precarious situation, to say the least. So night falls. We're watching a small fire back in the wetlands, and we know the land and where the water is and where the land bridges are. I'm talking to the firemen about it and the potentials for which way it's going with the wind blowing. They said to watch it. If it got to be bad, to call 911 and let them know that it's flaring up, and they would come right back out. So at that point, we watched it. And unfortunately, this is the only picture I took of this as it got worse. We weren't sure what it was going to do, but I can explain this a little bit further. Once the fire did get across the wetland, or in the wetland, it roared. The wind blew, and it blew directly towards our warehouse. So we grabbed fire extinguishers. We knew that the woods was coming. It was coming in our direction. We had embers that were going across the jumping across and landing in our big grove of bamboo, lighting it up like a Christmas tree. And this is right against our building. Lots of dry tinder, very, very bad. We're spraying fire extinguishers up into it. We're stomping out embers that are in the ground or on the ground as they're falling all the way around us. And this picture doesn't do it justice. It roared. It landed all over the warehouse. We were able to put stuff out. We did everything we could. We called 911. My mom called 911. They got some confusion. They sent the police thinking that 2 miners had ran out into the fire someplace. So the police had stopped me, wanting to know where the miners were. I told them our children had gone to Melbourne, and there was nobody else out here except for the 3 of us fighting this fire. The embers rained down all over, and then the fire came to an end there and started shifting to the left out around the path where there was more fuel, and it just continued to go from there out around and back towards our house. Now the firefighters had showed up. They had called in bulldozers that had come in as well. Now this is working off to the left. There were some fire lines already cut, so it wasn't as bad as it looks. It wasn't really going to harm us at this point. The warehouse was safe. Firemen are there. We're watching it. Got a chance to watch it from a distance. Of course, we got the shark in the silhouette there, and it's just burning all that hot stuff that's there. Now, we had mowed a lot of the wetland area as it was dry to get rid of some dry stuff a week or 2 ago, and that definitely, I think, helped. So the bulldozers show up, and I tell you what, these guys drive those things. They waste no time plowing fire lines. They are in and out. Get in, put it out, and get back out as fast as they can and off to the next one. Now keep in mind there's multiple fires going on all over that night, so they're having to jump, mobilize, and just keep on going. I'm surprised how fast these guys get this work done and how well. So we're walking up the driveway towards my house, and we look over to the left. The embers had started the fire on the other side of our house on fire. Started the forest on fire on the other side of the house. They brought the bulldozers around, circled it, put it out before it could roar down to the next house, not too far from there. I know these pictures are blurry, but I tell you what, I give these guys a lot of credit. They're putting their lives in danger getting out there in the fires. Really, really did a good job. Fires go out for the most part. We go to bed about 2 a.m. This is what we wake up to the next day. Ash all over in front of our warehouse. Ash everywhere. Some burns in the roof of some of the plastic and stuff. Nothing major. Went back and saw some of the spots where they had plowed around the outside of the fence and the backside that had not burned the night before. And we waited for the humidity to drop and the winds to pick up to see what was going to happen again. And so we waited and we watched. And of course the little bits of fire that were there turned into more and more. And we went through another round. we had a chance to walk around and look at all of the different areas that had burnt, and pretty much everything on this side of 44 was burnt. A few patches here and there. We had one more strip along the farm that hadn't burned yet. But the palmettos everywhere had just gone up like crazy. You know, they had plowed. I can't believe how much they had plowed around. But when the wind's blowing at 20 miles an hour and these palmettos are going, I don't really think you can stop it very well. You can just contain it the best you can. So for all of you that have been here, you can see the different perspectives of different angles of all of the stuff. Again, more ash that had fallen. Now this stuff was glowing red when it was dropping. As you can see right behind the tree house, right up to the fire line. Now this is where the pine trees stopped, and we have oak trees, and the fire stopped at the pine trees. The oak trees did not go. You can see the garage there to the left. Here's a better shot of the garage, and you can see all the burning. This is facing out towards 44. This is looking through the woods there somewhere along the way. Just all the stalks of palmettos. This is along 44 itself, along the road. The bamboo's there on the edge of our property, and then there's just acres and acres and acres of pines and palmettos. It burned all the sod on the road. It jumped across the road, and that's when it went over to Billy's place and really started tearing into that. He stayed, he fought it, and did protect his property. I'm sure it was pretty darn hot and pretty stressful, but he did save his structures. And behind there is the biggest flames that you probably saw on some of the pictures that were here. This is facing towards Royal Trails. That morning the fog and the smoke were pretty thick, but nothing like it was this morning where the visibility was less than 20 miles. This is part of the log cabin, or next to the log cabin, up the road where a small structure did burn. But the log cabin stayed, even though the bamboo and the structure next to it burnt down, and there's a lot of bamboo around that log cabin, and that log cabin is like 100 years old. It survived, very, very surprisingly, but it did. Now there was fire burnt on both sides of the log cabin and behind it. And this is the morning where there's still some, in one of the pictures here you can see some flames or some smoldering stuff blowing directly towards the log cabin. So I know the firefighters can only be in so many places at once, and they're really having to go back and forth. I mean, I was surprised at how fast these guys were mobilizing and scurrying. They really did a great job of protecting everybody along the way. So we had a chance. We walked out to the forest, looked around, saw just more burnt stuff everywhere. Everything's black and charred. Some of the stumps had burnt way down in the ground, maybe 18 inches down in the ground. Now there's just a hole with a little stick that's still on fire. But there was other areas where there was a few palmettos standing, and I'm not sure how they stayed standing with all the fire around it, but they did. There's one of the holes there. We saw full standing trees out in the open just burning. It had gotten so hot that the sap was just keeping the side of the tree on fire with nothing else around it. Never seen anything quite like that before. And it burned hot, and it burned, I'm assuming, all night long. This was the next morning, and again, just a lot of little fires. And as the day progressed, the winds picked up, and the fires came again, as expected. You know, they told us the night before, they said, this is the calmest you're going to see it. Tomorrow when the winds pick up and the humidity drops, it's going to get just as bad. And it did. The wind picked up. The flames came. They were helicopters circling around, spotting everything, just watching. So we walked down back to where the fire was still smoldering and watched it as it continued to build, and the winds to build. There was also a plane that was circling around at the same time. So this is the fire as it's just getting going. It's slowly burning across the wetland. They had cut a fire break, and as the wind would blow it kind of down the fire break, the fire would fight the wind and crawl across the ground. But every so often the wind would shift direction and the fire would just roar and race forward. And once it hit heavier stuff, it just continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the wind would shift and it would die down again. So it was on again, off again until it hit something that was big, like a tree, and then of course it just blew up. So we have a rental house to the right of this picture with the wind blowing directly to the rental house, and this fire slowly builds. We've got firemen at the rental house, and the tenant there. They're wetting everything down. They did some back burns and so on to try and control it. I had called to say the fire's burning, building up, and it's going to be coming that way. So the firemen were ready over there. They had actually drove their trucks out to assess this area. And I tell you what, it takes a lot of bravery to drive a single wheel, or a four-wheel drive, but not dually, truck back through that freshly plowed sand with fire coming to assess it and see if they need to spray it and so on. But that's exactly what they did. And these are just pictures as we wait. This is over a period of probably an hour as this slowly crawled across. And we knew there was brush right here, and as it was working, just as the wind was getting ready to switch, was just continuing to build. So Cheryl's taking some pictures. We're not in any harm's way. We've got a good fire break. We've got ponds near us. There's nothing else really to burn except when it builds up and then goes to the right and heads for the rental house. For the sake of time, this is a fairly quick edit, so some of these pictures may be a little drawn out. They're just as we snapped them along the way. Winds were blowing at this time at probably only about 10 miles an hour. It was not roaring like it was the day before, thank goodness. But as the fire gets closer, it hits the bigger stuff, and as the wind blows in the right direction, it just builds up. Some of this was stuff they knocked down the night before while they were out there with the dozers. And I don't know how these dozer operators operate. They get out there in an area, it's dark, there's smoke, there's fire everywhere, and they're able to cut these lines and get around these fires and do their job and get back out. I mean, it's hard enough to walk through the woods at night on a normal night when you have no pressures, but these guys are out there and they're getting it. I mean, they're pushing wide open and in and out, cut the brake, and keep on moving. It seemed as though the sand pines, or the pines with the very fine leaves, would just, any heat underneath them and they would take off to the extreme. I know all of our houses, we're getting rid of every pine tree if there's any left at this time, because seeing this compared to the oak trees, it's just not worth having them. I think I would rather have a bare lot than a lot filled with these pine trees. So this again would just smolder, and it would flame, and then it would smolder, and as the wind's blowing from left to right, the flames would die down. The winds were trying to blow it across stuff that had already burnt, but here again the wind shifted, or they're blowing towards us lightly, and the flames just continue to jump. And this is not with a lot of brush overall. I mean, this brush pile is only maybe 3 or 4 foot high and fairly light in compared to the other stuff that we saw burn in the other areas. So the trucks drive out through, assessing the situation, trying to warn, I guess, and spot the other firefighters as to what's coming, because this is going to blow right down through. This is between us and Botany Woods, and now we've got the helicopters again flying around, spotting, checking things, trying to give the crew some more instruction. Now, there to the left, there is bulldozers working, cutting more fire breaks. It's gotten so hot that we've stepped back a little bit from the from the flames as they're blowing through. And here's where it starts getting a little scary, because to the right is a lot more patch of woods. Now, they've been cutting all kinds of fire breaks through there and knocking stuff down, but there's still a lot of dry stuff there. And to the right is the rental home with asphalt shingles. We have metal roofing and concrete siding, but this other place is, well, it's wood with asphalt shingles. So we had some worry there. We decided to take off, head over there and see if there was anything that we could do.